Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at OccupyFantasy.com, here to talk about some NFL DFS picks and tips for the wide receiver position on the Week 3 slates for DraftKings and FanDuel here this week. We're dropping these position preview videos every week throughout the entire season, so if you like that, make sure you subscribe to the channel below. You'll get notified when we upload a new video for you throughout the NFL season. If you like the video, we certainly would appreciate if you like the video here on YouTube. It lets us know that you want to see more of this type of content in the future. If you have any questions for us about wide receivers this week, drop a comment on the video below. Be happy to talk about your favorite wide receiver and answer it there. You can also consider joining our Discord, which is linked above the description of the video below. Come in there. You can chat with other Occupy members as well as our staff about the upcoming action here in Week 3 and throughout the rest of the NFL season. 2 weeks does start to give us a little bit of a better sense for how these teams plan to deploy their wide receivers, throughout the rest of the season, provided everybody stays healthy anyway, which is, a big question, obviously, and that changes things. So we start to feel a little better about what we have here in front of us. The field does as well. And so basically the first place to kind of decide what you want to do this week is with Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is effectively the most easily projectable wide receiver that will be popular on this slate. He's going to be in a ton of lineups on FanDuel and DraftKings this week, even in high-risk contests. You can see his ownership, definitely kind of above 20%, maybe even higher than that. So there's a decision to make there. If you're not using Cooper Kupp inside of a, full-on Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Los Angeles Rams game stack, unless you're playing low-risk contests where he's certainly a strong play, double-digit targets, both of his games so far, like a roughly 35% share of both the air yards and the targets for Matthew Stafford. So great play overall, but understand that everybody kind of knows that. So from a tournament perspective, if you're not getting kind of game stack correlation, there may be a path to being a little more unique and finding more upside by playing someone else here. We actually just posted our model for Week 3 over on OccupyFantasy.com, the NFL model. And for wide receivers, Cooper Kupp is obviously amongst the leaders in the slate. We project 10 targets for him. Again, just understand he's going to be extremely, extremely popular. Other side of that game has a couple of opportunities. First and foremost, we just learned here on Wednesday, afternoon, Antonio Brown, unfortunately, on the COVID-19 restricted list now for the Buccaneers, likely unavailable to play on Sunday. That sort of solidifies the roles for the two main guys here, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Kind of interesting. You see here on DraftKings, Evans a little more expensive than Godwin. FanDuel went the opposite direction, made Godwin a little more expensive than Evans. Our preference is probably Chris Godwin here. I think you'll see more targets than Mike Evans will. We actually have Godwin projected for roughly 8 to 9 targets. Evans 6 to 7. Evans, interestingly, does actually have a little bit higher share of Tom Brady's air yards so far through 2 weeks than Chris Godwin does. So Evans is seeing, more valuable targets down the field. Godwin getting a little bit more of the volume so far. And Godwin actually playing very well out of slot route positions, where actually the Rams have been kind of hurt the most so far through 2 weeks of play. So we kind of lean Chris Godwin as the better play on DraftKings and FanDuel here at Occupy this week for that reason of the Buccaneers wide receivers. If Antonio Brown is out, which that does look pretty likely, we're going to have to think about the role for this guy here. Probably slides in as their third wide receiver. Hasn't done anything for us yet so far through the first 2 weeks of the season, but he could be an interesting name to watch here in Week 3, depending on how, the actives inactive situation shakes out with Tampa Bay. I think a lot of people that back DK Metcalf getting frustrated, right? First couple of weeks of the season haven't been exactly what you wanted, and you've also seen Tyler Lockett just dominate first couple of weeks of the season, get a couple touchdowns on the deep targets, right? So think DK has a little bit of momentum here potentially going his way, a little bit of squeaky wheel gets the oil potentially from Russell Wilson. This is an extremely difficult situation to project, to be honest with you. Both of these guys are strong wide receivers. That's Metcalf and Lockett. Kind of think that, what you should do here is consider that Metcalf hasn't really had his big game yet, and so that's probably coming. Russell Wilson probably wants to keep, both his guys happy here. So winning football games is the ultimate goal, but these guys like to get their numbers too. And Tyler Lockett has certainly gotten his share of those, going over 100 yards twice here, 3 touchdowns so far on the season. Definitely think DK Metcalf is hoping to sort of catch up to his buddy there in the wide receiver room and even the score there with some of the fantasy points here. We actually project both for an identical 7 targets in the Occupy model this week. And I think we probably lean DK Metcalf because Minnesota Vikings have actually been a little bit more susceptible to allowing production to true, wide receiver one routes. And Metcalf still sort of holds the edge with those in this offense. So definitely think he might actually finally be in the right spot to have his big game to kick off the season here. Speaking of the Vikings, obviously, we like the high total game environment here between Seattle and Minnesota. Watch our quarterback video. We did talk about how Kirk Cousins is one of our favorite options. One of his favorite options is Justin Jefferson. The targets are pretty healthy here through 2 games, 19 through 2 games, 9 and 10 each. Just 1 touchdown so far. Hasn't really truly had his big game yet either. And now entering a spot where probably could do that. He actually projects for the most targets in the Occupy model this week, just over 10 targets. He sits at the top of our model in that particular metric. Seattle has been pretty good defending the pass, in particular guys that run those primary receiver routes so far through the first couple of weeks of the season. So consider Jefferson probably just a high risk only play for that reason. Wouldn't necessarily trust him in your low risk lineups, which would be your head to heads and your double ups and stuff like that. Mentioned squeaky wheel gets the oil a little bit with Mike Evans potentially in the Bucs, or at least I think I did. Squeaky wheel definitely looking to kind of get more oil in this game is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill did not have a great game against Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football. And I think, Patrick Mahomes is well aware of that, wants to get his favorite wide receiver weapon more involved here in their game against the Los Angeles Chargers. Highest implied team total this week, for the Chiefs in this game against the Los Angeles Chargers. We got Tyreek projected for about 9 targets. And, we all know what this guy can do once the ball's in his hands in the open field. Tyreek's certainly going to be a great play. His price, obviously, a little exorbitant, but there'll be ways to work him in if you think it makes sense. The other side of that game, again, another popular high total game, potential game stack opportunity. Keenan Allen is inside, I want to say the top 15 in raw air yards this year across the entire NFL through 2 weeks of play. And he's one of the receivers that has the most air yards without having scored a touchdown yet. So those are things that we actually like to look at for guys that are somewhat underperforming their opportunity. Allen here still extremely involved for the Chargers. Just 1 passing touchdown for Justin Herbert in each of the first 2 games. That situation needs to sort of normalize a little bit and get closer to, his average of 2 to 3 touchdowns per game we were expecting ahead of the season. Keenan Allen looking like the most likely guy to benefit from that. Keenan Allen also running over 65% of his routes out of slot wide receiver positions, according to Pro Football Focus. So that's a spot that actually the Chiefs in particular have been pretty poor defending. A couple of videos now where I think I've mentioned the Chiefs have been very bad defensively in general, allowing 7.6 yards per play to opposing offenses through 2 weeks. See no reason for that to really stop here as they face this high-powered Chargers offense that hasn't really truly hit their level yet through 2 weeks of play. Keenan Allen looks like the biggest beneficiary there. We project Allen for 9.8, call it 10 targets in our model. His buddy, who did get into the end zone last week for the Chargers, Mike Williams, is also an interesting play. 6,400, so he's a couple hundred less than Allen. I think a lot of people will probably play at least one of these 2 guys, especially if they're stacking, the Chargers here this week in that Chiefs game. Kind of think Keenan, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler. These 3 guys are kind of right in that range for who's going to be the most popular Charger this week. It'll be interesting to see what the field does here. But both both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, certainly interesting options. I would think Keenan Allen is the better place to go here, but we'll see what shakes out by Friday when we post our daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. The most mispriced player on the board, I don't think this is going to be a mystery. I think a lot of sharp people here are going to be pointing this out. It's Marvin Jones with the Jaguars. He's clearly their wide receiver 1. Laviska Shenault, a little banged up after week 2 action, so that's certainly a spot to watch. Jones, a great play, even if, Jacksonville is extremely healthy and all of their main guys are going. You tell me Laviska is going to be out. That just sort of definitely solidifies the role and the opportunity for Jones in this offense. Probably going to be a staple of all types of lineup builds this week at this price tag, facing the Arizona Cardinals and what will end up being another game where Trevor Lawrence and company have to press the ball downfield to keep up with the elusive and quite productive Kyler Murray. Marvin Jones will be probably the best receiver to bet on, on the other side of some Arizona heavy builds, if that's something you're interested in doing this week. Do you have the stomach to do this? I don't know if I do, but I have been looking at it, and I definitely think there's some opportunity with some wide receivers from a pretty disgusting team here in Week 3. And it's the New York Jets. Braxton Berrios fired up this video. You were not expecting to hear about Braxton Berrios, right? But look at the targets here through 2 weeks. And this is all, a giant caveat that this is definitely because Jamison Crowder hasn't played. Jamison Crowder has been their primary slot receiver for a couple of years now, inactive through the first 2 weeks of play. Braxton Berrios, the biggest beneficiary. This kind of happened a little bit last year in spots where Crowder did not play. New coaching staff, so we didn't know that they would treat Berrios the same way until we saw it the last couple of weeks. So, keep an eye on this. If Crowder is out again, I think Berrios becomes interesting against the Denver Broncos. The Jets are heavy underdogs, 10.5-point underdogs. Braxton Berrios could end up being the slot wide receiver again here. Project him to see just under 7 targets if that role stays steady for him. And his salary is dirt cheap here. Obviously, his teammate, the rookie, Elijah Moore, another option that's extremely affordable. We project him for around 5 targets in this matchup. Both these guys, Berrios and Moore, actually did play more than Corey Davis in Week 2 against the Patriots. I suspect Corey Davis was sort of sent home or sent to the showers early because that game was out of hand. The Patriots sort of ran away with that one, definitely defensively. So keep that in mind. Probably not super safe to assume that Davis doesn't stay ahead of both these guys, but both these guys projecting to see decent opportunity at low salary, and that kind of becomes an interesting tournament option to consider as a result. Same game, other side of it, Cortland Sutton is the NFL's leader in air yards now through 2 weeks. His role really grew without Jerry Jeudy available in Week 2 for the Broncos. 12 targets, 9 receptions against the Jaguars. Probably going to play an extremely similar role here in Week 3 against the Jets. Another one of these guys, much like Keenan Allen, who has not yet found the end zone, but is still getting a ton of opportunities. We like that here. A lot of people around the DFS world like that. I expect Cortland Sutton, if he can go, obviously he's got a Q tag here this week, will be an extremely popular wide receiver this week in DFS. That is it. These are the wide receivers I did want to talk about with you today. Did I miss one you were hoping to hear about? Please drop a comment in the video below. I'd be happy to address it there. Or consider joining our Discord, which is linked above the description of the video. There's a link for you to consider joining our Discord, where the Occupy staff, guys such as myself, Brian Jester, and all of our subscribers are in there talking about every single NFL slate throughout the season. And obviously all the other sports as well that are in action. We have some coverage there as well. Keep an eye out for our daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. That will be published by Friday afternoon. That'll go over not just our favorite wide receivers on the slate, but quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, our favorite contests to play, depending on what kind of bankroll you have to deploy, and our favorite ways to attack ideal low-risk and high-risk roster constructions, depending on the context of the slate, which is the key to finding success each and every single week. So be sure to check that out as well. Again, that's the daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. Lots of things going on in our YouTube channel this year, folks. Really glad that you were here to check out this video. Once again, for Occupy, I am Chris. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.